Welcome back to the Finding Purpose podcast. Thank you, everyone, for your engagement, for your likes, for your comments, for everything that is contributing to building this community that I'm trying to build. I really hope you had a chance to listen to my episode with Alessandra Cortina last week. She's just like a powerhouse woman, just building out her law firm, overcame a lot, and then really got grounded in her passion to empower other women entrepreneurs as well. So if you haven't, definitely check that one out. Reach out to her, reach out to me, and let's continue to build what we're building. Today, this is a long-awaited episode. Today, I'm so lucky to have my friend Carl Michel, King Carl, young exec, here in studio. Carl has been a mentor to me. You know, I met Carl through our friend Brandon Godoris, through their speaker schools. And I was always really enamored by the way he carried himself and just his like willingness to always just give back. He is a best-selling author. He is also a world-class public speaker, coach, just an amazing role model. Particularly the work that he does in the New York public school system, empowering kids of all ages to find their voice. Dude, I just love that.
Oh, man.
I love that, man.
I appreciate you so much, man. Thank you. So I just want to say that you're doing some amazing things. So it's an honor and privilege for me to even be on the show, man. So I love the fact that you're not only doing things for yourself, but also putting on a lot of people in the community. And one thing I admire the most about you is your consistency. You know, one of the things that separates you from everyone else is you being consistent. Starting a podcast isn't easy. Starting a business isn't easy. Starting anything in life isn't easy. But for you to consistently put in that work, man, you deserve to be commended as well, man. Salute to you.
Well, I appreciate that so much, Carl. I mean,
bro.
You know, that's something, though, that I learned, you know, through the community that you and Brandon build and watching the way you guys move. And, you know, I know parts of your story and you've shared some vulnerable moments through those speaker school experiences, but I'd really love to dive into your story here so my audience gets to know you a little better.
For sure.
So tell me a little about yourself. I know that you grew up in Stanford.
Yeah, you know what? We're just up the street. I grew up in Stanford, Connecticut. Both sides of town. I was born in Port-au-Prince, Haiti, so I came here when I was really young. I was like 3 years old when I came here. And you know, for whatever reason, at that time, there's a lot going on, right? As far as the neighborhood and the climate is concerned, I grew up in what we call the crack era. So everyone in the neighborhood was either on drugs, selling drugs, or affected by it in some way, right? In addition to that, I'm also a Haitian. So at the time, Haitians just had a bad reputation. You know, we were getting bullied. It just wasn't cool to be Haitian. So a lot of people were just attacking me, and the neighborhood I grew up in was rough. So it was a lot going on. So I was always having to defend myself, you know, and one of the things about growing up in the neighborhood that I grew up in, there was a lot of hustlers, a lot of drug dealers there. So if I was in a position where I had to defend myself as a kid, the drug dealers would come down and root for whoever was winning, you know, so they encouraged violence and negativity at a young age. So if you won that fight, you got to chill with the drug dealers all day, you know? So I started winning fights and I started hanging out with them. And, you know, that was a climate and environment that my father wanted me to stay away from. So he moved us out of that neighborhood at a young age. So by the time I turned 10, we were out of that neighborhood across the street in Stanford. But we moved to the opposite side of town. And, you know, it was still similar in terms of the neighborhood. But the biggest difference is we weren't directly in the projects. We were across the street from it, you know, so adjacent to it, we still got a lot of exposure to different things that we shouldn't have as kids. But we were still blessed to have both parents in our lives teaching us right from wrong and helping us do the right thing. So I grew up in Stanford, went to school at Morgan State University, but I just realized throughout the years that I was a follower. And I just wanted to be cool. I just wanted to be down. So I was doing a lot of things that a follower would do. So whenever my friends wanted to cut class or do something stupid, I was down for it just for the sake of trying to look cool or act bad. And, you know, I just realized that that wasn't me. It took me a long time to find a mentor in college. It took me a long time to, you know, start shifting from a follower to a leader. But thank God I did, because none of this would have happened if I stayed hanging out with the people I was hanging out with. None of it would have happened if I stayed in the neighborhood that I was originally in. So I thank my dad for that. Not only moving us out of that neighborhood, but paying for college and so many things that he's blessed me with. So I understand in that regard, I grew up with privilege.
Yeah, no, I love that. And, it's so funny because the geographical shift from, one neighborhood to another,
Mhm.
obviously your dad was trying to protect you and instill different values, but you said something super powerful where I realized I was a follower. Was there a moment where you just looked at yourself and was like, what am I doing?
Right, right. I don't think it was a moment where pardon me. I don't think it was a moment where I looked at myself and asked, what am I doing? It was just a realization that the friends who I thought were my friends weren't really my friends.
Mm.
And that was a hard lesson to learn. And I kind of got forced to separate myself from them because I was in a position where I was on campus one night after a night of partying. Unfortunately, I was drinking. Um, and I got into this big, huge altercation with these dudes on campus. And it resulted in like a high speed chase type of thing. And I ended up crashing my car, right? Totaled the whip. And at that time, it was four of us in the car. And then there was four dudes in the other car. The four dudes hopped out. Like, thank God, like I missed a huge tree by like 2 or 3 feet. It would have been the end of us, right? But we missed a tree, spun out. All my wheels were shattered. The car was like smoking. It was bad, right? It ended up being towed away. But I hopped out, no bruises, no cuts, nothing. I was like, oh, wow. Okay, good. So I hopped out. The dudes in my car hopped out. The dudes in the other car hopped out. So in my mind, it's four of them, it's four of us. It's about to be a 4-on-4. So all four dudes approached me. So I'm getting ready to get into it. I look behind me. There's nobody there. I was by myself after that huge car accident. I'm
Everyone
thinking
ran.
we're about to get into it right now. I look behind me, no one is there. Literally by myself. Thankfully, the police came right at the right moment, because it's about to be a 4-on-1. And the police came at the right moment. The dudes left. So they didn't get questioned by the police or anything like that. And they towed my car. My mom was cursing me out on the phone. She said, I'm taking you out of that school. And when they towed my vehicle, I just went into a state of shock. Bro, I literally started shaking. My cell phone fell out of my hand and fell into the sewer. So in that one night, I lost my friends, I lost my car, I lost my cell phone, and I lost my college scholarship because my mother was like, "No, you're not hanging out with those dudes. You're not being in that school no more." She almost took me out of the school until one of my mentors had to convince her to let me stay. So at that moment, I realized, the dudes that you thought were really there for you, like, absolutely show you that they weren't. So why are you literally risking your life to hang out with dudes that are not even going to be there for you when it counts? So that was the moment when things started to shift for me. A week later, one of my classmates introduced me to a marketing company, and I started focusing on business and not focusing on, pleasure, so to speak.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think that's so important. And I think we all reach that point where we're like, hey, what are the authentic relationships that I have
Right.
in my life? I mean, for me, it came a lot later, where I realized that the people who I was hanging out with in bars and the people who were like, quote unquote, my drinking buddies really didn't have my best interest because
Right.
when I was in the bottom, my phone didn't ring. The only people who were calling me were, family, maybe a close circle of friends who
Right.
I've had for years. And, for me, that made me a little guarded. That made me a little less trusting of others. How did that affect relationships for you as you jumped into the business world? Because you just kind of had this rude awakening. It's like, these were never really authentic relationships.
It's tough, right? Because genuinely, I'm a giving person. Genuinely, I'm a loving person. Genuinely, I'm a giver. So for me to have to look at everyone that's coming in my circle or even in my presence, like, can I actually trust this person? It makes it hard, So I try not to base a new relationship off of past circumstances. So I like to give everyone a clean slate when I meet them, But I also allow people to prove themselves.
Yeah.
A lot of people, let's just say you start with an A grade in their lives.
That's what they say in school.
And if something happens, then they work their way down. I kind of let everyone start at like a C level. I'm not gonna fail you, but I'm not gonna give you an A+. So I let everyone start with a clean slate. And if you earn your way up, then it's all good.
Yeah, that's so true. And, I'm the same way, but also there's a lot of people who I've met through the years that just gave me that feeling in my gut. And a lot of the times I ignored that.
Right.
Knowing that they probably weren't good for me, knowing that, however this relationship runs its course, it's probably going to end well and end poorly for one of us. And oftentimes I would ignore that because in that moment, maybe that relationship had value.
So you got to trust yourself.
Yeah.
You got to trust your gut. You got to understand you have intuition and discernment for a reason. When you're around someone, energy doesn't lie. So when you're around someone and you feel a negative vibe, a negative presence, a negative force, you got to pay attention to that. Like, okay, I don't think I should really get close to this person because it doesn't feel right when I'm around them. Notice how you feel when you're around certain people. Am I at peace? Am I on alert? Am I on edge? Or do I get a negative vibe from that person? Because energy doesn't lie. When I used to introduce my friends to my parents, my dad was sometimes he was so rude. He might shut the door on someone. He's like, yo, I don't trust that person. I'm like, Dad, you don't even know him.
Yeah.
But he was going off of his energy, his intuition, and his personal experiences. So I was like, wow. And it ended up being dead right. He was spot on every time. Yeah. My mother's spot on every time. I bring a girl around her. I don't like that girl. I'm like, Mom, you didn't even give her a chance. She already knows.
Yeah.
And then later down the line, that girl cheated or something happened where she look at me like, I told you. So you same thing with you. You got to trust that intuition. You got to trust your gut.
Yeah, it's so funny because my parents were the same exact way. My dad, like to a T, was like that. He had strong feelings about a lot of my friends, and it's because he saw what I was getting into, and it was also he was a big proponent of you are the company that you keep, and now I finally understand what that means. Where it's if you surround yourself with people who add value, who are ambitious, who are disciplined, who are caring, who are sympathetic, who have good hearts, then more than likely, these positive attributes are going to rub off on the entire group as a whole.
Facts.
And, that's really what I try to do now, where it's, like connecting with Brandon was one of the most life-changing things in my life because he opened up a door to all these different folks and different careers. But at the end of the day, the one thing they all had in common was they wanted to get better each and every day, and they wanted to bring you up with them.
Facts. There's two things I want to share real quick. A scripture that my mother used to always say is, do not be misled. Bad company corrupts good character. So I was hanging around negative people and I didn't even realize I was slipping down. It started with my grades. I went from honor roll and dean's list, 3.83 GPA, all the way down to 1.1 GPA in academic probation. And there's another scripture she always used to say is, as iron sharpens iron, so one friend sharpens another. So when you pick the right friends, you're literally getting better and sharpening each other and evolving, right? If I didn't meet Brandon, I don't know where my life would be right this second. Of course I was still doing my thing, but when you collaborate with the right people, you excel at a higher level. Yeah. Brandon and I were living in the same city, didn't know anything about each other. We come from different backgrounds, different walks of life. We might have never met had it not been for a mutual connection. And I am so thankful that he was open to collaborating and I was open to collaborating because on paper, we're totally different people that would have never met. Yeah. So I just want to share how important it is for you to collaborate with people who are different than you are. Yeah. Right? Whether it's race, religion, background, orientation, whatever you feel is a difference, still collaborate with people. Like the best things happen when people collaborate.
Yeah, I totally agree. And that's helped me to reach out to people who I normally wouldn't. And also just understand that just because they're different than me doesn't mean their journey doesn't run alongside mine.
Facts.
You know, like at the end of the day, like the entrepreneurship, for instance, I may be in a different phase as someone who I may not think might be a collaborative partner, but at the end of the day, they have been on the same emotional journey that I have when it's come to getting to where I am, or they had been on day 367, you know, at one point in their journey as well. So kind of recognizing that has been like a huge part of me just opening up my mind and being creative with the relationships that I have. You know, I think that's super important when it comes to collaboration, where it's like, hey, like, why not, rather than make excuses as to why it's not a good fit, find ways that it is.
Facts.
And it can open up an entire door of opportunity. One thing that you did mention earlier was when you jumped into the marketing, you know, and marketing in the business fields, you said you had a mentor.
1,000%.
And I know we talk about mentorship a lot. Who was that first mentor? And I'd love to learn more about them.
Yeah, man. He's the most charismatic, funny. He could draw a crowd and captivate an audience. And he was the best storyteller. His name is Mr. Darnell Self. This was the first time, I think I was 19 when I met him. This was the first time I met a multi-millionaire who didn't play ball, never sold drugs, and he wasn't a rapper. Growing up, I thought sports, drugs, and entertainment were the only ways a young black man could become a millionaire, you know, because that's all I was exposed to. And it wasn't until I met him personally that I saw he was doing all these amazing things in business, and he was willing to teach me how to do the same thing. So I paid attention because when I was growing up, I paid attention to the drug dealers because they had everything I thought I wanted. Yeah. Cars, clothes, money, girls. I'm like, okay, that's success. So that's what I want. I'm going to pay attention to what they're doing. But now I'm meeting a multimillionaire who had a family, who had respect, who was building a legacy. His principles were faith, family, and then finances, because I was like, oh yeah, Mr. Self, we're going to make a lot of money together. He's like, hold on, Carl. Money is a byproduct of the person you become. Once you have faith in God, once you put God first, everything else will fall into place. That was his first principle. You know, family. Once your family is in order, everything's going to be right. That's the most important people in your life. I'm like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. Because a lot of times people are in such a rush to get the money that they'll sacrifice their spirituality for it. They'll sacrifice their family for it. They'll sacrifice a lot of things for money. And that's when money becomes your God, essentially. Yeah. You know, so he says, never get the order mixed up. It's faith, family, and then finances. So he was just drilling principles into my mind. I'm like, man, I didn't know that. And, you know, he's the one that really taught me not to read, but what books to read. You know, I hated reading at the time, but I grew to love the results of reading. So mentorship is huge. So not only could I watch him present, and I started to model my presentation after him, so that I credit him for a lot of the way I speak. But I also got to learn the things he did on a daily basis, the daily disciplines, the daily habits that led him to having that level of success. You know, a lot of my speaking, I do feel it is hereditary because my dad was a speaker, but I also learned a lot of the technical side of things from watching a great mentor.
What were some of the daily habits that he incorporated into his life that you adopted?
There's a lot of things. And one of the things we talked about reading earlier, he taught me that the average millionaire in this country reads 2 books a month. Only. Wow. It's 2 books a month, right? So that's 24 books for the year. And I'm like, Mr. Self, like, I don't really read like that, you know? And he's like, I was like, I don't read like that. I get sleepy when I read. It just doesn't work for me. He said, Carl, I understand where you're coming from because I the same thing. I felt the same way. He said, but if you take 10 minutes to read 10 pages of a good book every single day, by the end of the year, you would have read 3,650 pages. The average person in this country reads 0 pages a day. That's the reason the CEOs in this country make 300 times more than the average employee of that same company, because they know more than the average person. They know more than the average employee. So he said, just read 10 pages of a good book consistently. We were talking about consistency earlier.
Yeah.
If you read 10 pages consistently, you're going to be in a far different space at the end of the year than the person that's reading nothing. That's what the little things is what's going to separate us. We live in such a microwave society that we want to hit the lotto instead of learning how to operate a business. You know, we want to just lose weight automatically, so we might do a surgery or something like that, as opposed to exercising a little bit every day. So I read this book called The Compound Effect that Mr. Self recommended. And the principle is saying that success is not a quantum leap. It's small steps of progress every single day, just being consistent with little things. A little decision can go a long way when it comes to over time.
Yeah.
Right. So daily discipline. So that was one of the main things I learned from him. And another thing, one of the things that I was never really good with, the little bit of money that I did get, I would spend all of it. Right. So I'll never forget. I graduated college, and my first job out of college was working at Enterprise Rent-A-Car, right? My salary at Enterprise was $33,500, so $33,500 for the year. That's including overtime, right? So I was working 48 hours. I was working 48 hours a week, and we got paid every 2 weeks. So after taxes, my paycheck was about $1,000.
Yeah.
Right. So basically working 100 hours. And after taxes, my paycheck was $1,000. So it just wasn't adding up, right? But I said to myself, I deserve a luxury vehicle. So I got approved for a $30,000 Mercedes-Benz, right? And I said, yeah, I'm going to get this car. And Mr. Self said, Carl, you're making about $30,000. He said, why would you get a $30,000 car? I said, because I deserve it. He said, listen, he said something to me that I never forgot. He said, sometimes the things we buy to make ourselves look rich are the same things that are keeping us poor. Mm. He said, if you buy the car, you're going to want to probably take a girl out to dinner, right? I was like, yeah, for sure. He said, you're not going to be able to afford dinner if you buy this car. He says, what happens if the car tire pops? You're not going to afford a new tire.
Yep.
So you're literally going to put yourself in a position that is not going to be beneficial for you just because you're trying to look rich. So I didn't buy the car. And you know what happened? A few weeks later, I got a promotion at my job at Enterprise, and they gave me a company car.
That's awesome.
So I wouldn't have needed a car anyway. So I would have literally been wasting my money trying to keep up with a car payment that I couldn't keep up with.
Yeah.
You know, so those are just some of the principles that I learned from just studying under a great mentor.
Yeah, I mean they're so powerful though. Like especially the habits, to the things that you buy to make you look rich, and I think you see that all the time, especially in this very social media centric
right
universe where people are just trying to perceive this image of just wealth, but just like you remember a while ago, I think it was during COVID, maybe people were renting a private jet
just to take a picture,
on a runway,
just to take a picture,
just to make content that they were flying private. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And you know, like I think about that, and it gives me like such a different perception on like what do you really value, you know, and you know. Your mentor, he sounds like an amazing man because, you know, those type of things, especially given the community that you came from and all of that outside noise,
right,
like taking you under his wing, like that's amazing. So as you grew into the business field, right? I want to talk about how Young Exec came to be.
Good. Mm-hmm. So, Young Executive came through my marketing company. There was different tiers, right? If I remember correctly, there was like associate, senior associate, manager, director, and executive director. So executive director was one of those positions you had to qualify for every month. And I was like, I don't know, maybe a freshman or sophomore in college. And I said, one day I'm going to be executive director. And then I got real serious about my goals. And I said, man, by the time I graduate, I'm going to be executive director. That was my goal. So it's the shortest way to put the story. So everything I learned in business, I applied it to my fraternity. I joined my fraternity, Kappa Alpha Psi Fraternity Incorporated, in 2007 fall, right? And by the time I graduated and I walked the stage in spring of 2010, I was executive director with my marketing company, because everything I applied to everything I learned in marketing, I applied it to my fraternity. Everything I learned in my fraternity, I applied it to marketing. And that's what helped me take off. So I was making the phone calls. I was being consistent. I was showing up at the presentations and the meetings. I was being relentless. I was building my team. I was doing the personal development. I was learning how to do the presentations and getting better every day. I was taking no's like vitamins, right? People saying no, on to the next one. I did not let that discourage me. So I just kept going and pushing. Next thing you know, I built a team, and I was serious. They started calling me the campus CEO because they saw me. Most people dressed down in sweats and sneakers. I wore a suit to campus. Like, that's how serious I was. Like, people like, yo, what's going on? And I started introducing them to business. So I just kept going and growing every single day, to the point where I had the right structure for my team and the right mindset for my team. And I reached the executive director level before I graduated. And everyone was like, oh, that's the young executive director. That's the young executive director. Oh, get Carl on the phone. He's the young executive director. So I'm like, that kind of got a ring to a young executive. I ended up becoming the youngest executive director in the state of Maryland at the time where I went to school. So the name kind of just stuck. So when it came to building like a Twitter name, I was like, young executive. Yeah. At first, it was just a Twitter name that I came up with. But then when it came to building my business, writing my book and all that stuff, I just, I had a conversation with God, and it just opened up my mind and realized, like, yo, young executive is actually a brand. Yeah. I thought it was just a screen name. It wasn't just a username. It was an actual brand. And that's how I built everything up. So the birth of Young Executive came from personal development, marketing, building a close relationship with God, and being relentless about my dreams.
Wow, that's awesome. You said a couple of things there. You're taking no's like vitamins. And, I think that's something that a lot of people can relate to early on in their entrepreneurship career, early on in any new venture. Talk about that mindset. I think that's such an important mindset.
It is not easy to take rejection. It is not easy to take rejection. And a lot of times when we're in business, we take things personally. Mm-hmm. And once you remove the personal feelings out of it, things for you start to change. I don't know how much you know about fraternities or anything like that.
I was in one.
All right. So getting into a fraternity, the dudes that are already in a fraternity, they're going to treat you however they want to treat you when you're just a prospect or interest, right? Yeah. So that demeanor from the older brothers, that actually helped me in business, because I'm like, what's the worst a person can say? No. That's easy, right? Yeah. Like, trying to join a fraternity, there's a lot more worse things that they can say than no, right? But I'm like, okay, what's the worst that can happen from me trying to pitch this idea to you? The worst that can happen is that person saying no. And that's easy for me compared to what I just been through joining the fraternity. So it's like, yo, okay, they can't do anything to me. The worst that they can say is no. Why not see if the answer might be a yes? Yeah. And if it's a no, we move on for it, and there's no hard feelings. But I'm glad, and I told my friend straight up, hey, I'm glad if you just take a look at what I'm offering. It may be for you, it may not be for you, but if it is, great. If it's not, great. It's all good. So I just had to get out of my own way. And because before, when a person said no to me, like, what's wrong with you? You don't see that. Like, I would have an attitude, or I would be offended if someone told me no. And then people just stopped picking up the phone from me or stopped wanting to be around me because I was offended if they didn't want the same thing that I want. So put it this way. Just because I like driving a Mercedes Benz doesn't mean I want to sell these cars.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, it's okay for someone to just participate in the membership side of things, or maybe just someone just show up to the presentation. Maybe you just invite them to the dealership, so to speak.
Yeah.
But they don't have to sell the cars just because you're passionate about those particular vehicles. So same thing in business. You might be passionate about your service, but they might just want to be your friend. And that's okay.
Yeah.
So I learned not to ruin friendships over someone saying no to the product or service or even business opportunity that I'm offering. And I knew that the more no's I got, that means the more yeses I will get, So I started just paying attention. I started jotting everything down. In baseball and sports, they track everything down, right? So in baseball, they say, okay, this is his batting average versus left-handed pitchers. This is his batting average when it's raining outside. Like, who the hell keeps track of stuff like that? But I started keeping track of who was saying yes and who was saying no, and what I was getting a better opportunity for a yes with. Okay, I realized that when I sat down and did a presentation with someone, they were less likely to say yes versus me bringing them to an actual meeting, them meeting my millionaire mentors. They're more likely to say yes to that. So I figured out what they were saying no to, and I started figuring out what they were saying yes to. I kept track of everything. So I said, you know what? Let me bring them here. And then I also kept a track of everybody that I called. I had a list of over 1,100 people. So I'm like, okay, this person said yes, this person said no, this person said not right now, this person said follow up with them. I just started keeping track of everything, and I took the emotions out of the business, and I just started doing the best that I personally could.
Yeah.
And then everything became easier for me.
Yeah, I love that. Like taking the emotions out of business, and that's such a important thing to do. And I think for me, like, I get emotional.
Yeah.
Like, let's be honest, I get emotional. And, lately, particularly in this new role that I'm in, I've, led with emotion a lot when it comes to certain situations. And, I actually had a conversation with my mentor, and he was like, dude, like it's not personal, and you can't change people around you. You got to work with what you're working with. And at the end of the day, your skill set speaks for itself.
Facts.
They brought you in for a reason. And, like for me, like I was kind of blown away by how emotional I was in certain situations. Yeah. And, at the end of the day, like now it's like much better, but like sometimes you got to check that emotion. Sometimes you let that get ahead of you. And at the end of the day, it risks you not getting your point across, total miscommunication. Facts. And I think when you communicate just in a way where it's facts based, like these are certain outcomes, these are certain choices, and here you go. It's a lot easier to kind of detach yourself from the emotion of any situation. But you said a lot there, and one thing that I'm also holding on to that you said before was the faith, family, and finances. Mm-hmm. And I think those are like, and in that order, which is amazing. So I want to talk a little bit about faith. Like throughout your life, how has faith played a role in guiding you?
Tremendously. They say faith is the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things not seen. A lot of times we say, man, I got to see it to believe it. That's not faith. Faith is, I'm going to believe it, and because I believe it, I will see it. So I started doing things that other people would consider crazy. Like I had vision board parties. When I learned about vision boards, I brought my closest friends together. We sat down listening to some inspirational music, and we started cutting up magazines and putting things on the magazines. And I'm putting cars and putting mansions and yachts and family, and I'm putting all this stuff. But you literally were, I was manifesting the life of my dreams, and it takes faith to see that through. A lot of the things on that board came to fruition, and others I'm still working on it. But um, the faith, as far as believing in myself, brought me out of some dark times. But also my faith, as far as believing in God, brought me out of some dark times as well. Um, it was so bad for me when I was in college that I would go out with my friends, and most of my friends were in gangs at that particular time. On a Saturday night, I'll go out with my friends. We might get into a fight or two in the club or outside of the club or on campus or outside of campus. We might get into a scuffle after partying. And then the next day I was in church, right? I was living, um, you know, uh, contradictory life, a double life,
yeah.
right? How are you going to do that and then do that? So I just had to make a decision to, like, you know what? I can't do the things that I used to do. And one thing that I didn't share earlier, but the reason the idea for my book came into my mind was because of my faith. And I say that because the idea was a reward that I received from fasting. And most people think of fasting and think of dieting from food for a couple of days, right? That is fasting in the traditional sense. I was fasting from whatever I felt had a strong hold on me, right? And at that time, I was drinking heavily, right? Before, we used to drink just to have fun and vibe a little bit. But I realized later on when my parents were having the hardest time in their marriage, I was drinking because I was sad, and I didn't know what depression looked like, but that was a form of depression. I was drinking just because I was sad. I was trying to drown out my problems in alcohol. And so I said, you know what? I embarrassed myself on a business trip. I didn't want that to be my reality. So I said, okay, I'm going to take 1 year off of drinking. And I was like, man, I've never done anything like that. It's going to be difficult. I prayed to God in that moment, in that bathroom when I was throwing up my guts out. I said, God, I'm done for 365 days. This is going to be the hardest thing I've ever decided to do. I need your help. In that instance, he removed my desire to drink. So I could go to the bar. I could order drinks for other people. I could go to the liquor store and get stuff for people, but I had no desire to drink. And I made a deal. I thought I made a deal. He didn't even listen to me. So I said, hey, listen, I'm going to take a year off of drinking. I want to become executive director again, because at the time, I qualified for a few months executive director, and then the organization kind of tanked a little bit, right? I moved from college. I moved to Connecticut, and I was like, okay, having a hard time regaining my position as executive director. So I said, God, I'm gonna not drink for a year. If you remove this desire from me, but I want to be executive director by the end of this year. I'm telling him what I want, right? So to make a long story short, 2 weeks before the year was up, I had one of those frustrated prayers. I said, God, I'm not doubting you, but it doesn't look like I'm going to hit executive director this month. My time's almost up. I kept my end of the bargain. You ain't keep your end of the bargain. And nothing. I didn't get a sign, a message, a voice. I didn't get anything. And that was God testing me.
Yeah.
He was testing me to see if I would turn back on what I promised him I would do. He didn't make me no promise of me being executive director with that company. I made that. I said I wanted that. For 2 weeks, I never heard anything. No signs, no. And at the end of that 2-week period, I'm in the gym, I'm working out. The idea for the book came into my head.
That's wild.
He said, you're going to write a daily motivational book based on hip hop quotes. I dropped the weights. I literally grabbed my stuff. I ran to the car and I started writing. I started writing immediately that day because I knew that idea was divine. I knew that idea was going to change my life. I had faith. I didn't know how to write a book. I never did anything like that before. I didn't know how to become a bestseller. Never knew anyone that did that before. But I knew I was going to write this book. I knew it was going to become a bestseller. That's faith on so many levels. And I'm like, I have no idea what I'm going to do, but I'm going to do it. And no one really believed in me while I was writing it, but I believed in me. I believed in the message that God gave me. I believe in the fact that when I deliver this book, it's going to be a bestseller. And I just kept writing every single day. Every single day. So the idea for the book was a result of me fasting for a whole year.
Dude, that's awesome. That's what I call a God shot. I call them God shots.
Shot?
Yeah.
Okay.
Like when something in my path just clicks and I'm like, this is the green light. This was my path. I call it a God shot. Mm-hmm. And, I like how you talked about that feeling of hopelessness and depression when, your parents got divorced and you were leaning into the drinking a lot. And, obviously my issues with alcoholism have been well documented. And, for me, it's a little different. I got to ask God every single day to remove that obsession, and, that's how
that's deep.
That's how I live my life because, every day that I don't drink is a blessing. Mm-hmm. And, that's kind of how I approach it because, it's so funny though, because what it really comes down to is surrender. And surrender and checking your ego, man. Like for me, there were so many things that I thought I could do just based on me. I was that powerful. And, one of them was stopping drinking and I wasn't able to do that. When I leaned into faith and when I leaned into, I need help, I need support, I need to believe in something bigger than myself can actually help me to get to where I want to be. That's really when it changed. That's when these people started to come into my life. That's when I started working at Equinox, when I was working at Equinox. And I didn't think I was going to get that job because of my criminal record. And I ended up getting that job. That was one of the biggest gifts in the world for me, because it's such a stark contrast to the way I was living life and then going into a wellness space and watching people who are just already at the peak of what they do, just coming in every single day, trying to get a little better at the same time, regimented. And that's really where I picked up discipline. That's really where I was like, all right, these guys are doing it. At first it was, if I don't do it, I look bad. I work here, like I got to work out every single day. But then, it was that incremental work that I did each day where I started to see results. Like, and then I applied that mentality to everything else, and sorry. And I think that's, like you led it with the kind words about consistency. Like I need consistency in my life, whether it's every day praying to God and thanking him for keeping me sober for another day, starting my day that way. I need to do that because that's part of my daily discipline. And, I just love how that we're having this conversation because so many habits that we both do align.
Yep.
And I think that's why we connect pretty well. So you write the book and then Young Exec becomes the brand. Mm-hmm. When did you first have the desire to help to be in the schools?
So I linked up with this really great marketing company, and they were teaching me how to strategically become a bestseller. Because with anything, there's a strategy behind it, right? Yeah. If you win in the Grammys, there's a strategy. If you're going for a gold medal, there's a strategy behind it. Unless you're Beyonce, they just give you a unless you're Beyonce. So with becoming a bestseller, there's a strategy behind it. And I was saying, hey, my book is a motivational book, so just put it up in the motivational category. And they were like, Carl, it doesn't work that way. There's a gazillion books that drop in the motivational category. She says, what you want to do is pick a subcategory within motivation, and then that's how we'll release the book. And Amazon gives you 3 categories that you can choose. I said, okay. So the first category was motivation, but she also put it under youth. And then she put teens and young adults. So boom, that was a subcategory under motivation. Another subcategory she put was music. So we did music, more specifically, rap and hip hop, and R&B. So boom, that was another subcategory. And then the other category was arts and photography, because I have 36 original paintings inside the book as well. So all 3 categories, all 3 of them hit number 1, right? Mm-hmm. So because youth and young adults was one of them, I realized that, I'm speaking the language of the younger generation, because these are people that they want to hear from. These are motivational messages and daily affirmations. So now they're like, wow, this is a book I actually want to read. How many times they force you to read books in school that you're like, yo, why the hell would I read this for? Mm-hmm. Right? And one of the reasons I didn't like to read is because it wasn't appealing. The material wasn't appealing to me. So now I get to read from my favorite artist. Now I get to get some motivation from a guy that has a story that might be similar to theirs, and a daily affirmation to make me, feel good. And I did it in a bite-sized way, meaning I didn't want to read a whole novel, but I could sit there and scroll through Instagram and read a whole bunch of different things. Yeah. So why not make the pages like an Instagram caption and a quote? So I made a very small daily pages. You can read the whole page in under a minute in most cases. So the youth were just gravitating to the material that I was putting out there. And then I started touring all over the country. I went to California, to Houston, to Chicago, to Atlanta, to DC and Maryland, and Florida, just so many other places. Yeah. I was traveling the country and just speaking to the youth, because again, that's one of the categories that the book blew up in. So because I was speaking their language, they started to gravitate to it. And then I started to learn how to cater my story to fit what the youth was going through, because I know what it's like to be in their shoes, because I was a follower before. I had to grow to become a leader. So I started sharing with them, this is how I was when I was a teenager, and this is how I was as an adult. So these are the steps in between that I took to go from a follower to a leader. They started gravitating to that. So mixing my story with hip hop artists that they can relate to, it was a match made in heaven. So I started quoting whoever they liked at that time, the Little Babies or the Drakes and the Kendricks, or, and all that stuff. So for some reason, Tupac transcends generations. You can quote Tupac, everybody loves everyone. So, so just I started finding out who they could relate to. I started quoting those particular artists, but my book is full of quotes from artists of their generation that speak to them. And now they were seeing the positive things that they were saying.
That's awesome. And, now that you had the ear of the youth, I love all of the work that you do with them now to
Thank you.
Build them up and to connect with them and to ensure that they become leaders. How rewarding is that for you?
It's probably the biggest and most fulfilling thing that I've ever done, right? Every day being able to give back to the youth. And the funny thing is, like I said, when I go to speak to kids in schools, I'm not speaking to kids. I'm speaking to the younger version of me. I'm looking for the young me. The kid that might have been trying to be the class clown. The kid that might have been just one decision away from joining a gang. The kid that might have the intelligence, but just not applying themselves. Like, I want to speak to them. I want to speak to the younger me. The guy that was chasing girls and didn't even know how to talk to them. You know what I mean? So I'm looking to speak to the younger version of me every single time that I go into schools, and to be able to spark their minds is such a big deal. So like I mentioned to you before, I didn't see success personally until I met my mentor. So for me to be the person that didn't sell drugs, doesn't rap, and doesn't hoop, and still be successful, I want to be the person that sparks their minds.
Yeah.
Like, yo, if King Carl could do it, I could do it. right? That's what I want them to say. So it's like, okay, I don't mind sharing with them how bad I had it and where I am today. I don't mind sharing them the ugly side of being a follower. I don't mind sharing with and being transparent with my story. And that's one of the things I had to learn, not to be afraid to share my story because it will inspire others.
Mm-hmm.
Kids ain't trying to hear that surface level motivational stuff. We want to hear your story.
Yeah.
Tell me how you battled alcoholism. Tell me how you dealt with your parents getting divorced. Tell me how you dealt with grief. Tell me how you dealt with being broke or whatever, your personal story. Tell me how you dealt with assault and something happened to you that's so traumatic. And we shy away from sharing our stories because we don't want to relive that.
Yeah.
I don't want to talk about that. I like to say God will never allow you to go through or grow through things for you to keep it to yourself.
Yeah.
You're supposed to share your testimony.
Yep.
Yeah, that's the purpose of you growing through these experiences. You're supposed to tell other people because they don't have to repeat the same mistakes that you made. So sharing your journey and how you overcame certain obstacles will allow someone to be like, oh, you know what? I remember what Adam said.
Yeah.
I remember what Carl said. I remember what Miles said. I remember what such and such, I remember what she said. This particular person, now you're like, oh, okay. When that decision comes, you make the right one.
It's so funny because when you're saying that, that's what I think about when I shared my story for the first time in Chicago for the first speaker school. For those of you who don't know this, like Brandon and Carl host a speaker school. Brandon does a lot of the PR and a lot of times like he, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. But like your presence at those speaker schools, like is so amazing.
Thank you.
And that first time in Chicago when I shared my story is everything that you're saying where,
wow.
I did. And I talk about it a lot in this podcast where it's like I attach a lot of shame to my story. And, I think there are so many people out there clinging to their story because they don't think it doesn't have any power, B, they're ashamed of it, or C, haven't fully processed it themselves.
Yeah.
And sharing it is part of that process. Mm-hmm. Because when you share it and it's out there in the universe, it's real. Mm-hmm. And then you can really start to accept it. And I think that's the wall between acceptance and just kind of really leaning into your purpose. Because, after I was able to do that, I was like, man, there must be so many people who felt trapped like I did, and that's a big inspiration behind this podcast. It's where it can be a vulnerable space where people can share what they went through and other people can be heard and they can feel heard in this room. Mm-hmm. And hopefully someone listens to an episode and goes, damn, I went through the same thing.
Right.
Or
maybe they're going through the same thing.
Yeah.
And your words help them through it,
Exactly. Mm-hmm. And that's, but inspired by the community and that experience that you and Brandon allowed me to have, which is why I went to 3 other ones, because I wanted to refine that message and be able to talk about also other components of my story that I felt would help out somebody else. And that's really what it's all about. So I want to just lean into purpose. I think you're someone who lives purposely. You're someone who lives with intention, but you weren't always. What was the journey? Well, we kind of outlined the journey, but now what does purpose mean to you?
Oh, that's good. Doing what you love and loving what you do. Knowing there's a reason behind why you're doing what you're doing. What's the reason why? Your reason why is going to lead you to your purpose. And the things that you love or passionate about is going to lead you to your purpose. So for me, I always like to say, find a thing that you love so much that you would do it for free. Get really good at it and do that for a living. What's the thing that you love so much that you do it for free? Some kids are like, oh, I love video games. Some people are really passionate about video games, but there's people who design the games. There's people who test the games. There's people who are the world champions at games and things of that nature. You could make if you get really good at what you love doing.
Yep.
you could really make a difference and make a lot of money with it, right? Yep. I love speaking to the youth. I love inspiring people so much that I would do it for free. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times I still do it for free. Mm-hmm. But I got really good at it. And now I can make a living while making a difference.
Yeah. That's awesome.
So find the thing that you love so much that you would do it for free. And you might not know what that is today. Yeah. Well, then be good at whatever it is that you're doing. Because whatever it is that you're doing, if you do your best at it, it's going to lead you in the right direction. Yeah. So we talked about faith earlier. There's a story about David in the Bible. Before he was a king, before he did anything, he was just a shepherd in the field. But he got really good at his job. You got to protect these sheep. There's all types of animals that come. And the tool that he used to protect the sheep? Slingshot. He would take a slingshot and take a rock and shoo off the wolves. He would shoo off the lions and any animal that's trying to attack his sheep. So he got really good at his job.
Yeah, he did.
That wasn't his purpose, but he got really good at his job. So when this big, huge, giant dude came, threatening his country, threatening his family, threatening his God and his territory, he did what he knew best. He couldn't even fit the soldier equipment and he couldn't even hold up the sword. But what he did was he grabbed his slingshot and he said, if I could kill lions, tigers, and bears, this guy stands no chance. So he was able to slay Goliath with a slingshot because he got good at his job. His job led him to his purpose. He slayed Goliath, he cut his head off, and he became king.
I love that. I mean, also, it's if you're not doing what you're doing for your purpose, be the best at what you're doing currently, because at the end of the day, it will breed the habits.
Absolutely.
The micro habits, the discipline, that when you do discover what you're good at, you can hit the ground running. You're ready.
When your time comes, you'll be ready.
Yeah.
Because you were focusing on being the best at what you did. Mm-hmm. So if you're at a job you don't like, it's okay. Be great at that job. I used to work at a university where I had to bust out 100 calls a day to try to outreach cold calls, reaching the customers. They would hang up on me. They would do all this. I just got good at my job. And then when it came time to make calls for my own business, this is nothing.
Yeah.
I used to call 100 people a day for somebody else. Why can't I make 100 calls a day for myself? So now making calls for me was easy. I'll make these 100 calls a day because I used to do that when I was working at this university.
I used to do that too at university.
Yeah.
I used to do it post-university.
I was at Post too.
Yeah. OEI, right? OEI.
Yeah, I was at Post.
Yeah.
So I used to bust out 100 calls a day working at. It was a hassle.
Yeah.
If you made 80 calls that day, they would call you to the side like, Carl, your call volume is only 80, right?
Yeah.
I was like, but that's a lot.
Yeah.
It's like, no. If you were here for 8 hours, that means you only called 10 people within an hour. I'm like, damn, when you break it down like that, it sounds low. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? But if I could do that for somebody else, why can't I bust out 80 calls, 100 calls for myself for something that I'm passionate about, my purpose? So I got good at that job. So when it came to applying it for myself and my purpose, I could call 100 schools.
Yep.
It's no problem.
That's so funny that
I could call 100 customers or potential clients. I could do that because of what I learned at a job that I didn't really care about, but it led me to being ready for my purpose.
Yeah. I love that. That is so funny.
We work at the same job.
Yeah. Usually I ask at the end, what advice would you give to someone on the journey of finding your purpose? Kind of just gave it, but I don't really know where to go. If you have any additional advice that
it's okay for things to not look like what you think they are supposed to look like. That's when the greatest things happen, when you least expect it. We don't chase things. We don't chase money, because if you chase things, it will elude you like a butterfly. You attract things by the person you become. So if you're trying to, do certain, just be. You will grow to attract that particular thing. If you're going to podcast, be the best podcaster. If you're going to go to work, do a 9 to 5, be the best employee you can be. If you're going to business for yourself, do the best that you can. It's going to lead you to certain things. And it's okay to do what you're good at until you find out what your purpose is.
Yeah.
When you find out what your purpose is, give that 100%. But it's not going to initially look like what you think it's supposed to look like.
Yep.
The best things come in the packages we least expected.
So true. So true. King Carl,
Hey,
you're the man. I'm really grateful for you making the trip up here. For those of you who don't know, the weather was kind of shitty earlier, and we got King Carl up here in the studio here in Pop Light Greenwich. If you can, please share with my audience how they can get in touch with you and what you got coming up.
All right, check this out. I help people take their story, put it on pages and stages to earn big wages. So if you're looking to public speak, I co-host a speaker school. If you're looking to write a book, your time is now. And I say that because, like I mentioned earlier, don't be ashamed to share your story. It will inspire others. You've been sitting on your story for so long. Why not share it? Why not help people? And why not get paid doing it? All right. And also, if you're sitting at home thinking to yourself, like, man, I could really see myself going to schools and mentoring the youth. I also help people create programs to go to schools. Last thing I want to share is you make more money from teaching the thing than you do from doing the thing. I have made $0 from podcasting, but I've made approaching $1 million from teaching podcasting. I've made some good money writing books, but I've made way more teaching people how to write books. So if you're in a position where you're like, I want to mentor the youth, or I just want to mentor people in general, I can help you create a program and a proposal so that way we can blast it out to schools, to parents, to staff members on how you can help them help themselves. So if you're looking to do any of that, please get in contact with me. My email and everything is at Young Executive. So my email is info@Young-Executive. My social media is @Young-Executive, and that's spelled YOUNGEXEKUTIVE. So that's info@youngexecutive.com. And anything you need, I'll be available for you. So I'm here to help.
Thank you, King Carl. Carl Michel.
I appreciate you.
I'm so glad I got you on, man.
My
I'm
man.
so glad. Folks, I really encourage you to listen to this episode, catch up to all the other episodes, and, like, review, send me your comments. I can connect you with King Carl as well, and grateful for all of you.
Make sure you find your purpose.
Till next time.